I was 19 years old, living alone in the house while my parents were away for a week. It was a normal house in a quiet neighborhood, 2 floors. Nothing unusual about it. I had stayed home alone many times before, and nothing bad had ever happened, or so I thought. The first night was quiet. The second night was quiet too. On the third night, I stopped locking my bedroom door. I fell asleep with my headphones on, music playing softly. I felt comfortable. That was my first mistake. At around 2:40 a.m., I woke up, not suddenly, and not because of a sound, but because of a strange feeling that something had changed. My headphones were still on, the music playing quietly. I stared at my bedroom door, trying to convince myself that I was still half asleep. Then I noticed something small. The hallway light was on. I never slept with it on. I hated light spilling into my room. I was sure I'd turned it off before going to bed. I remember doing it clearly. I removed one ear cup and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, just the sound of the refrigerator downstairs and the ticking of the clock in the living room. I told myself I must have forgotten. I turned over and forced my eyes closed. Then I heard the floorboard, one slow creak, right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath. In that moment, my heart was pounding so hard, I thought whoever was outside could hear it. I stared at the crack beneath the door and saw the light shift slightly, as if a shadow had passed in front of it. Someone was standing there. I stayed frozen for what felt like forever. Then very slowly, the doorknob moved. It didn't shake. It wasn't forced. It was turned. The moment it met resistance, it stopped. My door wasn't locked, but it sometimes stuck because of old paint and swollen wood. You had to pull it a certain way. The doorknob turned again, slower this time. I don't know why, but that detail terrified me the most. Then they walked away. No rush, no panic, just slow footsteps moving down the hallway, then down the stairs. I waited until the light beneath the door disappeared before I moved. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I texted my parents first, then realized how pointless that was. Another country, another time zone. I called the police. They arrived quickly. One officer asked me gently if I'd been stressed lately, if I'd taken anything before bed, or if I was sure I hadn't dreamed it. I said I was sure. I didn't like the look he gave me after that. They left around 4 a.m. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I checked every door and window myself. The guest room door, across from my bedroom, was open. I never used that room. It was always closed. Inside, the bed looked wrong. The blankets were folded back, as if someone had been lying there and had just gotten up. There was a shallow indentation in the mattress, still visible, still warm. I left the house that day and stayed with a friend. I didn't return until my parents came back. I didn't tell them everything. How do you explain something like that without sounding insane? I never liked staying home alone, but that night, I had no choice. My parents had traveled in a hurry to attend a relative's funeral, leaving me alone in the old house we had lived in for years. I believed I was mature enough, but something inside me felt uneasy from the moment my father closed the door behind him. At first, I tried to convince myself that everything was normal. I locked all the doors, turned off the lights upstairs, and sat in the living room watching short videos on my phone. The clock read 11 at night. Then I heard a sound. It wasn't loud, just a faint rustling as if something had moved in the kitchen. I turned the TV volume up slightly, trying to ignore it. But the problem was, the windows were closed. A few minutes later, the sound returned. This time it was clearer. The sound of a drawer opening, then slowly closing. I stood up carefully, my heart pounding. I walked toward the kitchen and turned on the light. Nothing. Everything was in its place. I was about to return to the living room when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The small storage room door was open. I was sure I'd closed it an hour earlier. I stepped closer and reached out to shut it, but suddenly I stopped. A strange smell came from inside, the smell of dampness and breathing, human breathing. I stepped back, and at that moment, the light went out. I screamed instinctively and ran back to the living room. I locked the door behind me and stood there trembling, listening. Seconds passed. Then, soft knocks on the door. They weren't loud. They were slow, deliberate. Then a low, hoarse voice, barely audible, whispered, "I know you're here." My legs felt like they could no longer hold me. I backed away from the door, grabbed my phone with shaking hands, and called my parents. No answer. Then suddenly, everything stopped. Long minutes passed. They felt like hours. I heard nothing. I decided to run. I quietly opened the window, climbed down into the backyard, and ran with all my strength toward the neighbor's house. When the police arrived an hour later and searched the house, they found no one. They told me I was stressed, that everything I experienced was probably an illusion. Just before they left, one of them called me over. He pointed toward the storage room and said, in a disturbingly calm voice, "We found this, an old blanket, a bottle of water, and fresh footprints. Someone had been living in our house. That night, I was not alone, and I never slept in that house again." And that's the end of tonight's story. If you enjoyed the video and don't want to miss more scary stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Of course, give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. And if you have a similar experience or a scary story to share, leave it in the comments. I might read it in the next episode.